Welcome to Fix It Friday, and this week we are looking at a question about chemical tests. So very, very common in all the different exam boards, and most common mistakes are not applying to the actual question that's being asked, and we've got some wording mistakes, and so there's also some things missing in this description. So let's look at the question. We've been asked how to carry out tests to distinguish between solid samples, that's going to be important, of sodium chloride and sodium iodide. So actually what we're really looking for here is simply to distinguish between Cl- and I-. So the very first part of this question, it's not technically wrong, it won't minus marks from the question, but it's irrelevant and isn't going to get us any marks because both of the compounds contain sodium, so there's no point doing a flame test on the compounds. So it's not wrong, but it's also not important to this example. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Adding silver nitrate. Now we're getting into the right idea. However, there is a lot missing before we even get to the next bit of the question, which is also wrong. There's a lot missing, and actually we're not going to get the mark for adding silver nitrate for two main reasons. The first one is that in the question we're starting with solid samples. Now, silver nitrate is a precipitation test, and that is what most of our tests for ions, apart from the flame tests, are all about, and apart from the bubbles for carbon dioxide for a carbonate. So precipitation tests only work when we mix two solutions to get an insoluble solid. So you can't get a precipitate if you're starting with a solid. So the very first step that most students would probably miss in this question is that I would need to make a solution for each solid using distilled water. Very important that we use distilled water so that it doesn't contain any contaminating ions. Then let's start getting a bit more specific. Yeah, I am going to add silver nitrate, but I'm adding silver nitrate solution, and we never add silver nitrate on its own. So all of my tests for anions, negative ions, are going to involve addition of an acid. So if I'm testing for carbonate, I'm adding hydrochloric acid, and that's all I add. I see the fizz. If I'm testing for sulfate, I add hydrochloric acid as well as barium chloride. So I don't just add one thing. And in this case, adding silver nitrate on its own is not enough. I also need to add nitric acid. So we match the acid to the anion that's in the other substance that we're adding. So because we're adding silver nitrate, we add nitric acid. I don't want to add sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid because both of those contain insoluble ions when they mix with silver. So silver chloride obviously is insoluble, that's what we're using it to test for, but silver sulfate also not particularly soluble. So I have to use nitric acid because all nitrates are soluble. So silver nitrate, nitric acid, and then let's look at the next part of the answer. Huge big problem here. We're talking about chlorine and iodine. Chlorine and iodine have got nothing to do with this question. There is no Cl2 or I2 in sodium chloride and sodium iodide. So we need to say that chloride would be white, but again, missing information. We have to say precipitate. I'm just going to write PPT, which is a perfectly good shorthand for precipitate. So chloride would make a white precipitate. Iodine, well, if we did have iodine, it would turn brown, but we don't have iodine, we have iodide, so that's not brown, that's yellow. So iodide is a yellow precipitate. And if I had £1 for every student who's mixed up chlorine and chloride, or iodine and iodide, And if I had another £1 for every student who got the wrong colours of things related to group 7, then I'll tell you what, I would probably be on a desert island somewhere right now and not making videos for Instagram. So learn your colour changes, people. Get on the flashcards, get on the Quizlet, however you need to do it. Make sure that you're not losing silly marks for simple things.